worried about the future. Psalm 71, your lifelong divine shield prayer to protect against all enemies and guarantee peace. Are you lying awake at night, your thoughts spinning with fears of tomorrow? Does the uncertainty of the future gnaw at your spirit, leaving you anxious and unsettled? You're not alone. In a world where so much seems outside of our control, fear and worry have become constant companions for many. But what if there was a way to shield your heart from the turmoil? What if you could find clarity, protection, and peace even amid life's darkest storms? Psalm 71 is not just another ancient text. It's a battle cry for the weary, a declaration of unshakable faith, and a guide to facing life's trials with courage. For centuries, this prayer has been a refuge for those seeking strength in moments of doubt, clarity in confusion, and protection from forces that threaten to overwhelm them. Its words are not distant or irrelevant. They address the deepest fears of the human heart with timeless wisdom and divine assurance. In this video, we'll explore why Psalm 71 is so life-changing for anyone worried about the future. At its core, this scripture reminds us that we don't have to carry our burdens alone. It reminds us of a power far greater than our fire, a God who is our refuge, a fortress for the soul, and a constant source of hope. As we journey through its verses, you'll discover how this psalm isn't just about survival, it's about thriving. It reveals a path to resilience, drawing on faith as a shield to fend off worry, doubt, and the uncertainty of life's twists and turns. This is more than a message. It's an invitation to transform fear into trust, replacing the chaos in your heart with an unshakable peace that flows from God's promises. By the end of this video, you'll see why Psalm 71 has the power to become your lifelong prayer of protection. Don't let fear dictate your future. There is a shield waiting for you, a divine refuge ready to envelop you in peace. The answers you need are waiting, and they're closer than you think. Why Psalm 71 is timeless. A prayer for protection and peace. Psalm 71 has endured for centuries not because it is merely a part of Scripture, but because it taps into the deepest human experiences: fear, vulnerability, a longing for safety, and the unshakable desire for peace. Its words are not confined to the past. Their echoes reach directly into the heart of anyone who has ever felt unmoored by life's challenges. Whether we face tangible enemies or battles within ourselves, Psalm 71 wraps us in the assurance that God's presence is not abstract, but deeply personal and profoundly protective. The psalmist begins with a heartfelt plea, "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge." These words immediately pierce through to the core of what it means to be human, to stand in moments of weakness and admit that we cannot do it all alone. This is not a cry of defeat, but a bold proclamation of trust, a conscious decision to seek God as a safe haven in times of storm. In a world where control feels so elusive and fear often takes the reins, Psalm 71 offers a radical perspective. True security lies not in the certainty of circumstances, but in the constancy of a faithful God. This message resonates as much today as it did in ancient times. Modern life might not be filled with the physical enemies the psalmist writes about, but the threats we face are no less formidable. Anxiety, for example, is one of the most pervasive issues in today's world, leaving millions feeling trapped in cycles of despair. The constant pressures of daily life, chasing deadlines, worrying about financial stability, struggling with personal relationships, can push even the strongest among us to the edge. And when those pressures are combined with global uncertainties, the weight of it all can seem unbearable. It is here that Psalm 71 stands as a lifeline, reminding us that we don't have to carry the weight alone. What makes this psalm timeless is the way it captures not just the fears of the present moment, but the trajectory of a life fully entrusted to God. It isn't a shallow reassurance that hard times won't come. Instead, it's a robust declaration that even when they do arrive, they will never overcome us. The psalmist reflects on God's lifelong faithfulness. You have been my hope, Sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth. These words are a powerful reminder of the ways God has shown up in the past, rescuing, providing, sustaining. They challenge us to look back on our journey and recognize that even in moments when we felt abandoned, God's hand was guiding us. This perspective is transformative. In the middle of challenges, we are tempted to believe that the future holds only uncertainty and chaos. The human brain is naturally wired to seek out threats and worst-case scenarios, a survival mechanism that often leaves us stuck in cycles of fear. But Psalm 71 interrupts this pattern. It fights back against those intrusive thoughts, reminding us that God is not only present in the good moments of life, He is our protector in seasons of doubt and struggle. The promise of Psalm 71 is especially vital in dealing with fear of the unknown. As humans, we crave control, yet so much about life remains unpredictable. Plans fail, relationships falter, and the future is rarely what we expect. In moments like these, the psalm gently but firmly invites us to shift our focus. Instead of obsessing over what might happen, it calls us to trust in what we know to be truth. God's faithfulness gives us a firm foundation to stand on, regardless of what storms may come. Even more remarkable is the psalmist's ability to declare trust in God while still in the midst of struggle. This isn't a story of someone who has already overcome, looking back on their troubles with hindsight. It's the prayer of someone actively wrestling with uncertainty, crying out for help while still holding on to faith. In that tension, there is a powerful reminder. Faith is not about the absence of fear, but about choosing to trust even when fear is present. This is where the courage of Psalm 71 shines the brightest. It empowers us to face life's struggles, not with denial of our vulnerabilities, but with confidence in God's provision. What makes this timeless prayer so monumental is its ability to bridge the gap between past, present, and future, wrapping them all in the protective covering of God's promises. The psalmist remembers God's faithfulness since their youth, acknowledges the challenges they are facing in the present, and declares hope for the days ahead. Even when I am old and grey, do not forsake me. This is the heart of the prayer statement, that God's protection spans every phase of life. As you consider the weight of your own challenges, reflect on this question. What if you were to lean fully into the kind of trust Psalm 71 describes? How would your life change if you traded anxiety for assurance, striving for surrender and fear for faith? Wouldn't that be a future worth walking toward? Psalm 71 invites us to take that step, to place our burdens into the hands of a God who has never failed us and never will. It's a prayer of resilience, yes, but also a promise that peace is possible both within and beyond the struggles of today. The modern enemy of peace, fear and anxiety. Fear and anxiety have become the defining struggles of our modern age. In a time where information comes at us relentlessly, where the world feels more unpredictable than ever, and where silence and stillness are rare luxuries, the human mind finds itself caught in a perpetual battle against worry. Anxiety over the future, fear of failure, and uncertainty about things beyond our control are like silent thieves, robbing us of our ability to live fully in the present. These are not new struggles. Human beings have faced these battles for centuries, but the pace and complexity of life today seem to amplify them in ways our ancestors never imagined. Psalm 71 directly addresses this battle by offering a spiritual weapon against the chaos of the mind. It acknowledges the very real presence of enemies, whether they are external or internal. The psalmist doesn't shy away from admitting their own vulnerabilities, saying, "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." These words are raw and relatable. They strip away the pretense of strength and speak honestly about what it feels like to live with uncertainty. Isn't that what we all need, a permission to admit that we're scared, that we don't have all the answers, and that we feel small in the face of life's unpredictability? But what makes Psalm 71 so revolutionary is that it doesn't stop at describing the problem. It offers a way out. It offers hope. Modern psychology teaches us that the brain is wired to focus on threats, a survival instinct rooted in our evolution. However, this constant state of alertness often locks us into cycles of stress and worry, releasing cortisol, the body's stress hormone, and draining us of peace. Psalm 71 serves as an antidote to this by shifting our focus away from fear and toward faith. Instead of dwelling on potential threats, the psalmist repeatedly calls on God, turning their worries into prayers. This simple act of reorienting thoughts away from fear and toward divine refuge has profound psychological and spiritual implications. Consider how the psalm reframes fear. Instead of allowing the mind to spiral into worst-case scenarios, it presents the image of God as a refuge, a literal place of safety. The very act of imagining God as a fortress, the immovable protector, can change the way we respond to our worries. That's not just spiritual wisdom. It's backed by modern science. Studies show that when we picture a safe and calming presence, whether through visualization or prayer, our brain's stress response begins to dissipate. Serotonin increases, dopamine stabilizes, and our body and mind begin to return to a state of peace. What Psalm 71 teaches us, then, is a truth that psychology has only recently begun to confirm. What we focus on creates the reality we live in. The modern enemies of peace take many forms. Fear often disguises itself as overthinking, analysis paralysis, or even busyness. Anxiety manifests in racing thoughts, sleepless nights, and the mental weight of what-if questions that seem endless. And yet, Psalm 71 counters these enemies in a way that feels almost subversive. It doesn't say to fight harder, to work more, or to try controlling every detail of your life. Instead, it invites surrender. It says, "Be to me a rock of refuge, to which I can always go." Imagine a life where that was your instinct, to run not to your fears, but to God. How would that change the way you respond to the things that keep you awake at night? One reason this psalm is so powerful is that it acknowledges the complexity of fear without letting it define us. It recognizes that fear is a real response to real threats, but it refuses to let fear have the final say. In verse 20, the psalmist declares, "Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again." This is a profound reminder that fear, while loud and persuasive, is never the end of the story. Restoring peace may not mean the removal of every challenge, but it absolutely means the assurance that we don't face those challenges unprotected. It's also worth noting how personal this prayer of Psalm 71 becomes. The psalmist doesn't address God as a distant deity or a vague source of hope. They speak directly, urgently, "My God, do not delay." There is an intimacy in the words that reminds us of our ability to call on God in the same way. And herein lies the ultimate weapon against fear and anxiety, not the promise of a problem-free life, but the unshakable confidence that we can bring all our burdens to the one who will never tire of carrying them. Our modern world pushes us to seek quick fixes for fear and anxiety. A new app, a productivity method, a mindfulness technique. These can provide temporary relief, but Psalm 71 offers something deeper. It roots us in a lasting peace that comes not from controlling our circumstances, but from trusting in God's presence through them. It replaces the futile pursuit of power over the uncertain with the comforting knowledge of a protector who never falters. What if the key to overcoming fear wasn't solving all your problems, but trusting in the one who sees them all? What if the antidote to anxiety was not more plans, but more faith? Psalm 71 reminds us that the divine protection we seek is already at hand. We only need to reach out and take refuge in it. Fear may be loud, but the voice of peace is louder if we're willing to hear it. Each time we choose trust instead of worry, we weaken fear's grip on our mind and strengthen our connection to God's assurance. The cry for refuge, why trust in God, always delivers. When life presses in from every side, when the weight of uncertainty feels unbearable, the instinct to seek refuge is universal. But in a world where financial stability, relationships, and self-reliance are often portrayed as the ultimate sources of security, it doesn't take much for us to realize how fragile these earthly supports truly are. One unexpected setback, one fractured trust, or one moment of failure can cause everything we've built to crumble around us. Psalm 71 speaks to this universal human need for a deeper, unshakable refuge, a place to turn when all else fails. Its opening words, "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge," don't just reveal the psalmist's desperation. They affirm an unyielding trust in a God who never disappoints. The idea of refuge in Psalm 71 carries a profound resonance because it's not about escaping the challenges of life. It's about anchoring ourselves in the divine during those challenges. In today's world, the word refuge might conjure images of physical safety, a shelter from storms, a hiding place from danger. But the psalmist's refuge transcends physical protection. This is about finding an emotional and spiritual sanctuary, where fears lose their power and the soul is fortified by God's presence. It's about being able to say, even though the mountains fall into the sea, I am not afraid, because I am not facing this alone. Taking refuge in God is not passive. It's an act of complete surrender, a bold choice to step outside the noise of fear and into the stillness of trust. This is not a trust that comes easily in a world that prizes control. We're taught from an early age to map out our future, to prepare, to overanalyze every possible risk and solution. Even in our faith, we sometimes treat God as a last resort when our own plans fail. But Psalm 71 flips this thinking entirely. The psalmist doesn't wait for life to become unmanageable before crying out to the Lord. Their surrender comes first, right at the beginning. To say, "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge," is not to panic at the 11th hour, but to build trust as your foundation, long before the storms hit. This act of taking refuge is not naive or reckless, it's deeply practical. Modern psychology teaches us about the profound effect that trust plays in calming the mind. Studies show that when you trust someone, whether it's a friend, a mentor, or a higher power, your brain naturally shifts from survival mode into a place of calm and reassurance. This trust quiets the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and allows for better problem solving and clarity. Taking refuge in God taps directly into this idea. It places ultimate trust in someone who can never fail, shifting our focus from the overwhelming chaos around us to the steady presence of a protector who never abandons us. Psalm 71 also teaches us that God is a refuge we can approach at any time, no matter how far we feel we've wandered. The psalmist's words, "Deliver me, my God, from the hand of the wicked," remind us that even in moments when we feel surrounded by enemies, be they external challenges, internal struggles, or spiritual doubts, God's refuge is always available. There are no conditions, no prerequisites. You don't have to fix yourself before turning to Him. The psalmist comes to God as they are, vulnerable, overwhelmed, and honest. And it is precisely in that raw honesty that God's refuge becomes most transformative. Still, surrendering to God's refuge requires more than just belief. It requires faith in action. Faith that trusts even when answers aren't immediate, that believes in God's timing over its own. We live in a culture of instant gratification. People demand quick results, immediate relief, instant progress. But refuge in God isn't about quick fixes. It's about sustaining peace. The psalmist declares, "For you have been my hope, sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth." Here, the focus isn't just on what God is doing in the present, but on a lifelong trust that God's guidance has always been and will always remain faithful. Reflecting on God's past faithfulness helps build the exact kind of trust that anchors us during uncertainty. It reminds us that He has never failed us before, and He won't start now. What's also deeply comforting about Psalm 71 is that it doesn't shy away from the reality of fear and struggle. The line, "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone," reveals the psalmist grappling with their own limitations. But even in their fears of being overlooked or forgotten, the psalmist clings to God as their constant refuge. In this, we learn that refuge doesn't eliminate fear, but surrounds it with assurance. Even when life feels unmanageable, knowing that God is still present can transform the weight of fear into the strength of faith. Trusting God delivers not because it always removes the storm, but because it changes the way we experience it. It shifts us from a posture of panic to one of peace, from reaction to reliance. Imagine standing before the challenges of your life, no longer consumed by what you might lose or what might go wrong, but confident in the one who holds it all together. That's the promise of Psalm 71. It's not just a prayer of protection, but a declaration that there's no better place to turn. God becomes the refuge where your spirit finds both rest and renewal. The fortress that shields you from life's uncertainties while giving you the courage to keep moving forward. There's no decision more practical or more profound than choosing to place your trust in God. The psalmist understood this, and their words still resonate powerfully today. When the weight of fear presses against you, when the future feels like an enemy too vast to conquer, there is a refuge waiting for you. God is not distant or indifferent. He is the rock of refuge, the shelter that never fails, and the peace that delivers when the world cannot. Finding courage in the face of enemies. Life often feels like a battlefield, with enemies coming at us from all sides. Some of these enemies are external, unexpected tragedies, financial struggles, strained relationships, or the relentless demands of work and responsibilities. But just as often, the battles are fought within against fears that paralyze us. Self-doubt that whispers we're not good enough, and the weight of past failures that hold us back from moving forward. These enemies might not carry physical weapons, but they attack with something far more damaging: the ability to drain the courage we need to navigate life's challenges. Psalm 71 confronts these enemies head-on, reminding us that courage is not an absence of fear, but the quiet confidence that comes from trusting in God's protection. When the psalmist pleads, "Deliver me from the hand of the wicked," from the grasp of those who are evil and cruel, they speak to more than just physical enemies. They reflect the universal human struggle against forces that threaten the soul. These words resonate deeply because they are not just about survival, they are about the desire to stand firm when everything around you threatens to make you falter. The wicked may be literal for some, but for many of us, they symbolize the obstacles and negative forces that drain optimism and courage. Anxiety, cynicism, and even the voice in your own head that tells you to quit can all become enemies. The psalm reminds us that these forces are real, but invites us to anchor ourselves in something greater. Courage starts with perspective. When we face difficulty, one of the most natural human responses is to fixate on the problem itself. The more we focus on what's wrong, what we're up against, what might go wrong, the more our minds spiral into helplessness. This is where Psalm 71 offers a powerful reframing. Instead of centering on the fear, the psalmist focuses on God, declaring confidently, "Be my rock of refuge, to which I can always go." This isn't a moment of denial or blissful ignorance about their struggles. On the contrary, it's a powerful shift in focus, away from the size of the problem and toward the greatness of God. Courage isn't just about confronting your fears, but about knowing where to place your trust when fear arises. It's also critical to recognize that courage doesn't come naturally, is cultivated through relationship. Psalm 71 is not a solitary act of bravery. Every word reflects the psalmist's deep connection to God, a confidence built on years of surrender and faithfulness. These words remind us that courage isn't conjured out of thin air. It grows from the soil of trust. The psalmist reflects on the enduring presence of God in their life, saying, "For you have been my hope, sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth." Every decision to turn to God, every step of obedience during uncertain times fortifies this trust, building a foundation too strong to be shaken. This kind of courage comes not from self-reliance, but from drawing strength directly from God. In today's world, where self-reliance and personal strength are often glorified, Psalm 71 shows a different path. Courage doesn't mean pretending to have all the answers or muscling through life's difficulties on your own. It is about having the humility to admit that you cannot do it alone and the faith to turn to the one who can. This is a radical act in a culture that prides itself on independence, but it is also one of the most freeing choices you can make. Courage grows exponentially when you realize you have access to divine strength, power that exceeds anything you could ever muster on your own. The psalmist also acknowledges that courage is not constant. "Do not be far from me, my God. Come quickly, God, to help me." These words are not spoken from a place of invincibility. They reveal a moment of vulnerability. Even the most faithful grow weary. Even the strongest sometimes feel like giving up. What Psalm 71 teaches us, though, is that in those moments of weakness, courage is never lost. It may fade, but it can always be reignited through prayer, through crying out to God, through the active decision to trust in His presence, even when evidence of deliverance feels distant. The psalm gives us permission to be both brave and broken, to feel fear while also clinging to faith. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Psalm 71's approach to courage is its insistence on hope. Fear tells us that our enemies, whether they are circumstances, feelings, or even other people, are insurmountable. Courage, as the psalmist understands it, begins with hope. The belief that God's promises are greater than any opposition we face. "You will restore my life again. From the depths of the earth you will again bring me up," declares the psalmist, speaking not only of survival but of renewal. This isn't just about being rescued from a low point. It's about the confidence that God is in the business of restoration, taking what is broken and redeeming it. This narrative of restoration is deeply powerful in a modern context. Our battles with anxiety, doubt, and hopelessness can often feel endless, as though we'll never rise beyond them. But Psalm 71 gives us a different perspective, reminding us that defeat is not the end of the story. The courage to face your enemies is rooted in the assurance that God is working not just to sustain you, but to lift you up. To use your struggles as part of a larger plan for renewal and growth. What enemies are you facing today? Perhaps they come in the form of failure or rejection, or maybe they're the quiet, persistent whispers of inadequacy that gnaw at your spirit. Whatever you're up against, the message of Psalm 71 is clear. You were not meant to fight alone. God's protection isn't fleeting, it's present in every battle, every moment of doubt, every tear shed in silence. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's moving forward with the confidence that God is fighting for you, surrounding you with His unshakable refuge. Trust in that, and you'll find that no enemy, internal or external, past or present, can stand against God's power to protect and restore. Faith versus fear, breaking free from doubt. Life often feels like a tug of war between faith and fear, two opposing forces that constantly pull at our hearts and minds. Fear whispers worst-case scenarios at every turn, amplifying uncertainties and leaving us paralyzed and overwhelmed. On the other hand, faith is a still, steady voice, offering an unshakable foundation and calling us to trust in something greater than ourselves. Yet, so often, fear shouts louder, drowning out that quiet voice of faith. Psalm 71 not only acknowledges this inner conflict, but offers a roadmap to overcome it, showing us how to break free from doubt and anchor ourselves in unyielding trust. Fear thrives on uncertainty. It feeds on the unknown, turning unanswered questions into intrusive thoughts that swirl in our minds. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if everything falls apart? These questions may sound familiar because they're universal, they're part of the human condition. The psalmist understands this. In Psalm 71, we hear the cry of someone deeply in touch with their own vulnerability. For my enemies speak against me. Those who wait to kill me conspire together. This isn't a hypothetical concern, a reflection of real, tangible threats. And yet, even in the midst of these fears, the psalmist declares with unshakable confidence, "For you have been my hope, Sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth." This bold faith contrasts sharply with fear because it shifts the focus. Fear magnifies problems, pushing us to fixate on issues and challenges that seem insurmountable. Faith, however, places greater weight on God's promises than on the size of the obstacle. It's like trying to walk across a raging river by focusing on every hazardous current, only to sink further into panic at each step. Faith invites us to look up, to fix our eyes on the bridge of God's protection, the unmovable path that has always carried us through life's storms. The psalmist reminds us of this bridge when they confidently say, "You are my rock and my fortress." Courage flows from this acknowledgement. No matter how great the challenge, God is greater. But breaking free from doubt is not simply a matter of telling ourselves to believe. Faith is not denial. It doesn't pretend life is easy or the challenges are mild. The psalmist speaks openly of their struggles. "Do not cast me away when I am old. Do not forsake me when my strength is gone." These are not the words of someone unbothered by life. They are painfully honest. Yet, even in their weakness, they cling to the knowledge of God's faithfulness. Here lies the lesson. Faith is not about being fearless. It's about choosing to trust in the midst of fear. This choice, though simple in concept, is one of the most challenging and transformative acts a person can perform. It requires actively redirecting your focus. Fear thrives when we ruminate, when our minds endlessly churn through problems with no resolution. But the act of faith disrupts this cycle. Instead of spiraling deeper into uncertainty, the psalmist repeatedly turns back to God. Rescue me and deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me and save me. Each time doubt creeps in, faith responds by redirecting attention to God's power and promises. This cycle doesn't come easily, and it doesn't happen overnight. Like building any new habit, strengthening faith requires intention, practice, and persistence. What's remarkable is how faith begins to transform us the moment we embrace it. Fear has physical, mental, and emotional consequences. It grips our chests, robs us of sleep, and clouds our decision-making. But faith brings clarity. Modern science backs this up. Research shows that trust, whether in another person or a higher power, releases oxytocin, a calming hormone that regulates stress. By leaning into trust, the psalmist not only finds peace for their spirit, but also strengthens their ability to face life's challenges with focus and resilience. Faith doesn't always remove the storm, but it equips us to navigate it with calm assurance. Psalm 71 also teaches us that faith doesn't need to be perfect to be effective. Too often, people struggle with the misconception that doubt disqualifies their faith. But the psalmist's words show us something different. Their prayers are filled with a mix of certainty and pleading, confidence and vulnerability. Your righteousness, God, reaches to the heavens. Who is like you, God? Is followed closely by do not be far from me, my God. Come quickly, God, to help me. This tension reminds us that doubt isn't the enemy of faith, it's an invitation to deepen it. Faith flourishes not in the absence of uncertainty, but in the willingness to trust despite it. As the psalmist recalls God's past faithfulness, they reinforce their ability to break free from doubt. You have made me see troubles, many and bitter, but you will restore my life again. This is one of the most powerful truths of the entire psalm. Our faith is not blind. It is rooted in what God has already done in the moments when He carried us through crises, delivered us from overwhelming fear, and provided a way forward when there seemed to be none. Reflecting on these moments strengthens our faith for the future, reminding us that we stand not on shaky ground, but on a foundation proven time and again. Fear will always try to make us forget these truths. It will tell us that this time is different, that this challenge is too great. But Psalm 71 offers a defiant response. As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more. Hope is the antidote to fear's poison. It allows us to face uncertainty with the assurance that God is already at work, even in ways we cannot yet see. What would your life look like if you trained your heart to choose faith over fear? Imagine waking up each day, not paralyzed by what could go wrong, but empowered by the knowledge that God is your rock and fortress, unwavering and eternal. Psalm 71 invites us to make that choice not once, but daily, moment by moment. Fear may roar, but faith whispers louder, promising a peace that surpasses all understanding. With God as your stronghold, the chains of doubt fall away, and you are free to live fully, courageously, and abundantly. The power of gratitude, reclaiming peace in a world dominated by negativity and what-ifs. Gratitude is a weapon too often overlooked. Fear and anxiety tend to highlight what's missing, what's at risk, or what could go wrong, driving a wedge between our hearts and the peace we long for. And yet, woven into the verses of Psalm 71 is a profound invitation to something transformational: gratitude. not the superficial kind that simply lists good things once a day, but a deep, soul-changing practice that shifts our perspective and reclaims peace, even in the most difficult circumstances. Part of the psalmist's strength lies in their ability to reflect on God's faithfulness, not just in their present needs, but in their past victories. This act of remembering and thanking grounds them in a powerful truth. God has been there before, and He will be there again. The psalmist writes, "My mouth is filled with your praise, declaring your splendor all day long." At first glance, these words might seem like a reaction to joy or victory, but in context, they are far more profound. This is the praise of someone still in the struggle, still surrounded by uncertainty, yet choosing to focus on what God has already done. It's a deliberate shift in attention from their circumstance to their Creator. Gratitude, in this sense, becomes an act of rebellion against fear. When fear insists on telling us what could go wrong, gratitude pushes back by reminding us of all the ways God has already made things right. Modern psychology backs this up in remarkable ways. Research shows that practicing gratitude rewires the brain. It strengthens connections in areas responsible for processing positive emotions and reduces the activity of the amygdala, the fear center that triggers stress responses. People who regularly practice gratitude experience lower cortisol levels, improved physical health, and an increased sense of well-being. When we consider the psalmist's continual praise through this lens, we see that gratitude isn't just a spiritual exercise, it's a tool for regaining emotional and mental peace. But gratitude in Psalm 71 goes even deeper than a mere act of reflection. It becomes an active declaration of faith. By praising God for His past deeds, the psalmist fuels confidence in the future. In verse 14, they boldly declare, "As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more." This isn't blind optimism, it's a trust rooted in experience. The psalmist doesn't deny the existence of trouble or uncertainty, but refuses to let those things dictate their response. Gratitude reminds us that the same God who carried us through before is the God who walks with us now and will carry us in the future. It shifts our focus from what if to what is, and, ultimately, what God will do. This intentional gratitude is one of the most radical practices we can adopt in modern life. We live in a culture that constantly tells us we need more security, more success, more guarantees. Advertisements and social media fuel dissatisfaction, painting a distorted picture of how life should look. But Psalm 71 calls us back to simplicity, urging us to fix our eyes on what we've already received. Your righteousness, God, reaches to the heavens, you who have done great things. Who is like you, God? These words are not just an acknowledgement of God's greatness, but an encouragement to actively reflect on the ways His greatness has already touched our lives. Gratitude, as modeled in this psalm, also offers protection. When fear and doubt creep in, gratitude gives us a framework to resist them. Each word of thanks becomes like a stone placed on a solid foundation, fortifying the mind against the winds of uncertainty. Consider this: when you take time to thank God for specific moments in your life healing, provision, relationships, or even lessons learned in hardship, fear begins to lose its grip. You start to see your life not as a collection of obstacles, but as a tapestry where God's faithfulness is woven again and again. This reflection can change everything. It not only brings peace, but primes the heart for trust. When you're actively remembering what God has done, how could you not believe that He'll do it again? The psalmist shows us how to make gratitude a daily rhythm. Say it aloud: "My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to Y, whom you have redeemed." The emphasis is personal, intimate. Gratitude draws us closer to God by making His work tangible in our own lives. This is not a prayer for someone else, nor is it abstract theology. It's a relationship, a conversation, a response to the very real ways God has intervened in our personal stories. Gratitude transforms our faith from something passive into something experiential. It reminds us that God is not a distant force, but an active, loving Father who has shaped our past and holds our future. In the pressure of modern life, adopting a practice of gratitude can feel counterintuitive. How can we be grateful, we wonder, when there's still so much that's unresolved? But the psalmist's answer is clear. Gratitude isn't based on what we lack. It's based on what we have been given. The practice of thanksgiving isn't about ignoring our problems, but about bringing them into perspective under the light of God's goodness. Gratitude allows us to release fear and embrace trust, no matter the circumstances. As you reflect on Psalm 71, consider what God has done in your life. Start small if you have to. Thank Him for breath in your lungs, for moments of connection, for the times you thought you wouldn't make it but did. Let that gratitude flow into greater reflections. You'll find that the more you thank God, the more you recognize His hand in areas you hadn't noticed before. Fear shrinks in the presence of gratitude because gratitude shines a light on the faithfulness that fear tries to obscure. In a world filled with noise, distractions, and constant demands, gratitude is an act of peace, a refusal to let fear dominate the narrative of your life. Psalm 71 reminds us that gratitude is not just part of worship, it is a powerful tool to reclaim peace and quiet the chaos within. With each word of thanks, you align yourself not with fear but with hope, and with hope you set your soul on solid ground, trusting that the God who has been faithful before will be faithful forever. Practical, spiritual practices, turning Psalm 71 into action. Psalm 71 is more than a prayer. It's a source of strength, an anchor in turbulent times. But its power doesn't lie simply in its beautiful words or poetic cadence. Its power comes alive when it's put into practice, when the truths of this ancient song are woven into daily life, transforming how we think, live, and respond to the challenges around us. Too often, we hear inspiring scripture, feel its resonance, and then let it fade into the backdrop of our daily grind. But Psalm 71 doesn't just call us to listen, it calls us to act. It invites us to move from passive reflection to dynamic faith. So how do we take this timeless psalm and make it actionable in the chaos of modern life? One of the clearest ways to internalize the strength of Psalm 71 is to establish a rhythm of daily meditation on its truths. The psalmist himself demonstrates this practice by declaring, "My mouth is filled with your praise, declaring your splendor all day long." The idea is not to compartmentalize faith into a specific moment of prayer or worship, but to keep God's promises running as a constant undercurrent throughout the day. Begin by carving out intentional time every morning. Reflect on a single verse from the psalm, meditate on its significance, and ask yourself, how does this apply to my own struggle right now? Don't let the words remain abstract. Turn them into something personal. For example, read the opening verse. "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame." Imagine what it means for God to be your refuge today, in this moment, and allow those words to inform how you approach the day ahead. But this practice cannot end with thought alone. It must lead into prayer. Genuine, heartfelt prayer becomes the lifeline between your heart and the wisdom contained within Psalm 71. Speak to God as the psalmist does, without pretension, without rehearsed formulas. Bring your vulnerability into the conversation. Say, God, today I feel weak. Be my strength. Be my fortress. The beauty of Psalm 71 is that it gives us permission to approach God with desperation, with honesty, with questions. There are no expectations to come perfectly composed. Faith, after all, isn't about presenting a polished exterior. It's about bringing your whole, imperfect self to the one who already knows your heart. Whether you pray at sunrise, when stress builds at midday, or before bedtime, make turning to God a reflex, not a last resort. Psalm 71 also challenges us to deepen our faith by actively building trust in God's sustenance. Trust isn't intangible. It's like a muscle, strengthened by repetition and testing. One practice for building this trust is keeping a journal of God's faithfulness. Each day, write down one way you've experienced God's provision, no matter how small. It could be a moment of peace when you were anxious, an unexpected kindness from a friend, or simply the strength to endure a difficult day. Gratitude uncovers the patterns of God's faithfulness, reminding you that His power and protection have always been present in your life. And when doubt threatens to overwhelm, those records of God's past provision serve as powerful evidence that He will continue to sustain you. Beyond meditation and prayer, Psalm 71 calls us to embody faith through action. The psalmist doesn't merely dwell in the promise of God's refuge, they proclaim it boldly. My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to Y, whom you have redeemed. This is a declaration, not a passive acknowledgement. Joy and praise are active responses, not quiet reflections. While prayer and meditation build your internal strength, acts of outward worship express that strength to the world around you. Worship isn't confined to a church service. It can happen wherever you are. Sing in your car. Reflect on God's promises while walking in nature. Speak words of affirmation to yourself throughout the day, declaring with confidence, God is my fortress. I will not be shaken. Incorporating Psalm 71 into your daily life also means living with intention, aligning your actions with the truths it teaches. For instance, if you declare that God is your refuge, how can you show that in your daily choices? Perhaps it means releasing the need for control in certain areas of your life. Maybe it's choosing to respond to a difficult situation with patience rather than fear. Or maybe it's as simple as choosing kindness in moments where frustration might otherwise dictate your behavior. Faith is made complete through action, and those actions begin to reflect the transformative power of this psalm the more we intentionally practice them. Another powerful way to turn Psalm 71 into action is through encouraging others. The psalm is not just an individual plea for help, it's a reminder of the universal need for God's refuge. Take the comfort and strength you've drawn from its words and share that with someone else. Be that bridge of encouragement to someone who feels overwhelmed, just as the psalmist says in verse 18. Even when I am old and grey, do not forsake me, my God, until I declare your power to the next generation. The psalm's power is multiplied when shared. Whether it's sending a message to a friend, praying on behalf of someone struggling, or simply being present for someone, let this scripture inspire actions that reflect God's love. Finally, reflect on how Psalm 71 shapes your perspective toward the future. Verse 20 says, "Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again." Recognize that this is not just a hope for better days. It's a declaration rooted in faith. Make this your anthem when uncertainty looms, when worry about tomorrow begins creeping in. Repeat these words aloud as a mantra. You will restore my life again. This practice of affirmation doesn't just encourage faith, it strengthens your ability to face whatever lies ahead with courage and peace. Psalm 71 is not a passive prayer. It's an invitation to engage with God in every area of your life. By meditating, praying, recording gratitude, proclaiming His promises, and living out His truths, you take the psalm from words on a page to a powerful, daily experience that shapes your heart and your outlook. Fear will come, challenges will arise, but Psalm 71, when lived out, reminds us that God's presence is even stronger. His refuge is always available, and His strength never fails. Bridging faith with science, a modern perspective on protection. In today's world, where science and faith often seem to exist in two separate realms, Psalm 71 offers the opportunity to bridge these perspectives and reveal how they can beautifully complement one another. Faith brings peace to the soul, while science provides insights into how our minds and bodies are wired to respond to fear, stress, and uncertainty. What makes this connection so transformative is that the principles woven into Psalm 71, the call to trust, praise, and take refuge in God, line with modern scientific understanding of how we process fear and how we can break free from its grip. This isn't a conflict between spiritual belief and human biology. It's a demonstration of how faith speaks directly to the design of our bodies and brains, offering both physical and spiritual renewal. At its core, Psalm 71 is about turning to God as a refuge, a shelter from the storms of life. The psalmist boldly declares, "Be to me a rock of refuge, to which I can always go." This isn't just metaphorical language. Turning to God in times of crisis is not about emotional avoidance. It's about creating a space of safety where fear and doubt lose their power. From a psychological standpoint, this act of seeking refuge accomplishes something extraordinary. When we feel fear, our brain's amygdala, area responsible for processing threats, flares into overdrive, triggering the fight or flight response. This response floods our body with stress hormones like cortisol, leaving us anxious, tense, and often unable to think clearly. But when we pause and intentionally turn to a higher presence, as Psalm 71 instructs, we engage the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain associated with rational thought, focus, and emotional regulation. Science shows us that prayer and meditation practices, heavily implied in the psalmist's actions, have profound physiological benefits. Studies highlight that people who engage in consistent prayer or meditation experience reduced activity in the amygdala and increased function in the prefrontal cortex. This translates to lower levels of stress hormones, improved emotional stability, and a greater sense of control over one's thoughts. Praise and trust, as outlined in Psalm 71, are therefore not merely spiritual practices. They are tools that influence the brain's architecture, rewiring it toward calmness and resilience. The psalmist's repetition of gratitude and praise plays a key role in this transformation. "My lips will shout for joy when I sing praise to you," the psalmist writes, tying emotional relief directly to acts of worship. Gratitude, echoed throughout the psalm, functions as both a spiritual and psychological recalibration. Modern neuroscience confirms that gratitude activates the brain's reward system, increasing dopamine and serotonin levels, the very neurotransmitters responsible for feelings of happiness and peace. With each word of thanks, with each acknowledgement of God's faithfulness, the mind shifts further away from fear and deeper into joy. Psalm 71 serves as a timeless guide for redirecting focus from worry to worship, and the physical benefits follow naturally. Another striking parallel between the psalm and science lies in the concept of memory and reflection. Psalm 71 continuously calls upon the reader to reflect on God's past faithfulness, for you have been my hope, Sovereign Lord, my confidence since my youth. From a spiritual standpoint, this is an act of faith, remembering how we've been delivered in the past to trust that God will deliver us again. But psychologically, this practice of reflecting on positive past experiences, often termed positive recall, is one of the most effective ways to combat anxiety. Studies show that when we deliberately revisit moments of peace, success, or divine intervention, our brain responds by creating pathways that reinforce resilience. These neural patterns grow stronger with repetition, shaping us into individuals who are naturally more hopeful and less prone to fear over time. What Psalm 71 presents as an act of spiritual trust is directly in line with how the brain is designed to heal through remembrance. The psalm is also deeply reflective of a practice psychologists now champion, when the psalmist writes, "Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again." They acknowledge the reality of hardship without surrendering to despair. This is not denial of suffering, but rather a conscious choice to reframe it in the light of God's promises. Instead of focusing on the depth of the pain, the psalmist focuses on the certainty of restoration. Reframing, as highlighted in therapy and cognitive behavioral practices, is an essential technique to manage negative emotions. When we reinterpret struggles through a lens of growth or future hope, we weaken the grip of fear and build a stronger foundation for emotional well-being. Psalm 71 teaches this profoundly spiritual process in a way that is deeply practical for the modern mind. Mindfulness also weaves through the psalm's structure. The psalmist repeatedly grounds themselves in the present reality of God's protection. "You are my rock and my fortress." These words reflect a spiritual mindfulness, a deliberate attention to what is true right now, rather than what fears the future may hold. Modern mindfulness therapy echoes the same approach, encouraging individuals to break out of loops of anxiety by anchoring themselves in the present moment. The psalmist doesn't ignore the existence of enemies or troubles, but instead confronts them by focusing on something unchanging and eternal, God's nature. In doing so, they silence the noise of what if, and replace it with the comfort of what is. Finally, Psalm 71's emphasis on hope stands as one of its most healing aspects. "As for me, I will always have hope," the psalmist declares. Hope, unlike fleeting optimism, is rooted in trust. The belief that restoration is not only possible, but inevitable through God's faithfulness. From a scientific perspective, hope has extraordinary power. Research demonstrates that hope stimulates the brain's ability to set and achieve goals, enhancing focus and driving motivation. Hope combats feelings of helplessness, helping individuals view challenges as temporary rather than permanent. When Psalm 71 invites us to place our hope in God, it becomes more than a spiritual encouragement. It becomes a practice of rewiring our thought patterns away from despair and into resilience. By bridging the timeless wisdom of Psalm 71 with modern scientific understanding, we see that faith and science are not at odds, but beautifully integrated. The practice of trusting God as a refuge, praising Him through fear, reflecting on past faithfulness, and rooting oneself in hope transforms both the soul and the body. Fear no longer holds dominance, and peace becomes attainable even in the most chaotic times. God's design for the human mind reflects His care and intentionality. Every principle embedded in Psalm 71 mirrors practical, natural ways to calm the storms of life while strengthening both faith and emotional balance. This is the Psalm's ultimate gift, a pathway to protection and restoration that heals not just the spirit but the mind. With every moment spent in trust and praise, the divine and biological align, reaffirming that God's peace truly surpasses all understanding. a future anchored in peace. What happens when you entrust your fears to God? When you stop wrestling with uncertainty on your own and instead surrender your worries, anxieties, and doubts to the one who sees the end from the beginning. Psalm 71 provides the answer: life anchored in peace, guided by trust, and fortified by God's unshakable promises. This psalm is not just a cry for help, but a blueprint for living with resilience and hope in a world filled with uncertainty. It offers us a refuge not only for moments of crisis, but also for the quiet, everyday battles that weigh on our hearts. At its core, Psalm 71 reminds us that true peace is not found in controlling our circumstances, but in trusting the one who controls everything. The psalmist boldly declares God as their rock of refuge, turning to Him with confidence in times of need. Trusting God doesn't mean difficulties disappear, nor does it mean fear ceases to exist. It means those challenges no longer have the final word. It means that no matter how strong the storm, we have access to a fortress that cannot be shaken. This is the heart of Psalm 71. When we cry out to God, when we trust Him with our struggles and surrender our fears, He becomes our shield, turning our weakness into strength and guiding us with invincible love and care. This timeless message extends far beyond the limits of ancient poetry, applies to every worry and uncertainty we face today. Whether you are burdened by fears about the future, haunted by failures of the past, or simply overwhelmed by the chaos of the present, the promises of Psalm 71 offer steadfast hope. Its verses teach us that God doesn't just hear our prayers, He responds with action. He doesn't just comfort us in our despair, but delivers and restores us. You will restore my life again, the psalmist proclaims with certainty, offering a reminder that no circumstance is beyond God's redeeming power. But these truths are not meant to remain in our minds or on the pages of our Bibles. They are meant to be lived out daily. This week, I challenge you to put Psalm 71 into practice. Whenever doubt, fear, or uncertainty begins to creep into your heart, take a single verse from this psalm and make it your prayer. Repeat it aloud, carry it in your thoughts, and let its words transform your perspective. Perhaps it's verse 1, "In you, Lord, I have taken refuge," or verse 14, "As for me, I will always have hope. I will praise you more and more." Pick the words that speak to your moment and let them be your shield against fear. By doing this, you will begin to experience the very peace the psalmist describes, a peace that remains unshaken even in life's greatest challenges. Lastly, let this call to hope extend beyond yourself. If the promises of Psalm 71 have encouraged your heart, share them with someone else. The beauty of Scripture is that its power grows as it moves from person to person, heart to heart. There is someone you know, perhaps a friend, a family member, or a co-worker who needs to be reminded of God's protection and peace. Share this message with them, and you might be the vessel God uses to bring light to their darkness. Together, as we encourage one another and lean into God's promises, we create a community anchored not in fear but in faith, helping each other live with trust that His guidance will never fail. So, let's make a deliberate choice today. Let's refuse to let fear dictate our lives. Let's anchor ourselves in the confidence and peace that comes from knowing God as our refuge. And as the psalmist declares, "My mouth will tell of your righteous deeds, of your saving acts all day long." Let us move forward in faith, proclaiming God's goodness with every step we take. If this message has brought peace to your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it, someone who feels stuck in doubt, someone who's searching for hope. Together, let's inspire one another to place our trust in God's promises, to live with courage, and to build a future anchored not in fear, but in His unchanging love. This is the invitation Psalm 71 offers. Surrender your fears, embrace His protection, and walk forward into a future filled with peace.